Good afternoon, everyone. We are about to start another session at the Forecast Conference. And as we're moving into the V of the driver acronym for the conference, which is Vision, it is my great honor to introduce to you Prof. Kahwa, Prof. Ishenkumba Kahwa, who is currently the Professor of Supermolecular Chemistry, now Professor Emeritus of the University of the West Indies. Prof. Kahwa is known across the region, having served in all positions at the University of the West Indies, including being a Dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology at the Mona campus of the UWI from 2008 to 2013, and also a Deputy Principal of the Mona campus from 2013 to 2018. He has given a long service of 31 years, 31 glorious years, and following his retirement, he was given the title of Professor Emeritus. And that was conferred upon him because of the very significant contributions that he has made to the development of the Department of Chemistry, not only at Mona, but at other chemistry departments at UWI and the University of the West Indies as a whole. Notwithstanding that his many achievements in academia with many papers published, and I think one of the things that he's well known for is the fact that he established a laser laboratory at the UWI Mona, and that sort of facility currently includes powerful lasers, supercooled facilities, and all of the necessary electronic and computational instruments that scientists require to do their job. In addition, he has led the development and establishment of a new suite of programs at the undergraduate level and at the postgraduate level, and even PhD programs in occupational and environmental safety and health. And this effort has also been at the Mona campus, but also at the St. Augustine campus, and is actually one of the flagship programs of the department that I'm in at St. Augustine. Professor Emeritus Kahwa is very much engaged with the development of science, technology, and innovation in the entire Caribbean, and particularly in Jamaica. And he has actually led the STI policy development and review for Jamaica. He is known as having served with the CARICOM, that's a regional CARICOM STI committee that was established by Dr. the Honorable Wright Keith Mitchell, who we heard from previously, and in his capacity as the CARICOM Prime Minister in charge of STI, formally. And in Prof. Kahwa's work, he has looked at charting out strategies that are needed to develop the CARICOM region in terms of rapid economic growth and using social development via STI. I'm proud to say that he's the co-author of the current 2020 UNESCO World Science report, the chapter that deals with CARICOM STI, and this is published every 5 years since 2005. Currently, he's also the honorary consul for Tanzania in Jamaica, having, of course, come all the way from Tanzania to grace us with his presence and his long and very wonderful career and all of the achievements that he has to date. I'm going to hand you over to Prof. Kahwa, who will give us, I know what will be an inspiring talk. We do have some time for questions and answers at the end, and there is you have the ability to put your questions in the question box, and we will deal with them coming to the end. Myself, as well as research assistant at chemistry department at St. Augustine, Michaela Edwin, will help with some of those comments and also with getting the questions to Prof. Kahwa. So all over to you, Prof. Kahwa. I sit here now with all attention on what you have to say, because I know that this is going to be very important for us to hear.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, for that introduction. I think I will go, straight into the talk, and thank you all the organizers for inviting me to the conference. I have titled my talk as a question: CARICOM countries innovating into the fourth industrial revolution, and I'm going to try and give some answers in terms of what I think, but before then I'll give you a number of some amount of data that we need to to work with. So the talk is going to look at features of CARICOM countries, which you are all familiar with, industrial revolutions and the role of research and development, curriculum trends, some basically depicting curriculum's crossroads, and then I have a few suggestions on perhaps what might be a way forward. To start with, I want to say that I am going to borrow quite heavily from the report that we wrote for UNESCO, which Mike just made a reference to. And here we are seeing the Minister of St. Lucia talking to the children. She graced the cover of our chapter. And I should say this chapter was co-authored by myself and Dr. Alison Gajada from St. Lucia. Next. This picture is very familiar to many of us. We have a very confusing picture here. Over the last many years, almost 20 years, the CARICOM countries in terms of economic development have pretty much stagnated. We're going up and down, not really making much growth, at all, in some cases actually contracting. So we are starting with the picture that is really very, very, very worrisome. The kind of picture that actually requires innovation to kick in order to move, to open up new avenues for the economy. So it's a perfect storm, so to speak, because out of this, one would have expected that innovative mechanisms would have been crafted. Next. The exception in all of this is, of course, Guyana, which, as you know, is now pumping some oil, and certainly their economic growth has really, skyrocketed, so to speak. They do have some money now that they can use. Next. But otherwise, the rest of the countries are actually overburdened by large debts, and you can see in the second column here the debt to GDP ratio in 2016, quite high. Barbados 146 almost, Grenada 89 almost, Jamaica was at that time 120 something, 23 almost. Everybody is over 50%. Of GDP in terms of debt. So debt is really weighing heavily on these countries, and remittances are really a huge rescue in that particular situation. In the case of St. Lucia, it could actually it's so high, way up in the 21% in the last 2 years ago. Next. And you are also looking at the economies that are not diversified at all. Tourism, which is in black, dominates most of the economies, especially for those which are in the red. You can't look at Grenada, almost entirely dependent on tourism, and even Jamaica, which is a little bit, has some mining activity and so on. The dominant, really, close to 60% of its income is coming from tourism. So it's not diversified. All of these, again, are conditions that are ripe, for the economy to absorb, some innovation and move forward. In short, then, we have a sluggish economy that either has grown modestly or not at all. A debt to GDP ratio, which is crippling, very little room to maneuver in terms of providing services, health, education, and so on, because much of the money is taken up by debt. So we have a very difficult situation. Again, a perfect storm in which innovation is actually very, very helpful. Next. And all of this is because we do have severe environmental vulnerabilities. Dominica, a few years ago, lost almost 200%, over 200% of its GDP because of back-to-back hurricanes, and there is no end to it. We have limited access to technology for some reason. And again, you know, that is an area that we need to address, because it is actually generating and accessing technology where you can expect to change some of those unfavorable conditions that we saw earlier. Inadequate skilled workforce, that is, we hear it all the time. We don't have enough researchers, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough doctors, etc., etc. And then and even engineers, we don't have enough of them. The government in Jamaica was talking about requiring about 1,000 engineering graduates, you know, every year to be able to meet its needs, and it can't get those numbers yet. But we also have limited access to finance. This is a fixture that came in recently because of exposure to foreign banks. And you know, trading with us becomes a little bit difficult because of the regulatory strictures, you know, that have been put in place. Now, combine all of these factors, you have quite a big problem in our countries. Next. So we have a big problem, which when countries get problems like the ones we have just highlighted, you tend to go to innovation. There's no way out. And right now, when we are trying to situate the fourth industrial revolution, you need to start from the beginning, at least when we can. When steam and water power were discovered, and that was Industrial Revolution 1, and that also caused a considerable amount of disruption. I mean, people could move faster, more efficiently, could mechanize a little, and then came electricity, and that automated a whole lot of things. You could look at, I mean, you could run massive stuff. Manufacturing became a little bit easier. Mass production became a little bit easier. And when we thought that was great, then came the electronic and information technology systems that really solidified automation of many, many processes as we know them today. What is beginning to creep in at the moment is what is called the fourth industrial revolution. And this is really driven by cyber physical systems, but it is not really a simple leap in technology. It is really a very complex soup of what we work with, how we live, how we relate to each other, and how we relate to the environment, around us. It's a very complex system, much more complex than the three revolutions, that we have had. And I think the OECD does have, quite a good expose on the fourth industrial revolution. And I have just picked up a little statement from them. Next. The fourth industrial revolution, and this is from the person who actually coined that word. It says the fourth industrial revolution represents a fundamental change in ways that we live and work, and it goes on to describe, what those changes are going to be. I'll let you check it out. But it is profound. These are profound changes that are going to affect our lives, are going to affect the way we work, the way we live, the way we relate to people, the way we relate to the environment around us. Next. And it is driven by a number of factors, disrupting jobs, demanding new skills, which demand new skills, agile technologies, technology governance, agency and trust, technology innovation, ethics and identity, technology access and inclusion, frontier technologies, and many, many other things. And within those factors, as if they were not enough, they are enclosed basically in a myriad of issues and factors, all the way from technology to politics to law to everything that we can think of. The point I'm making here is that the fourth industrial revolution, as it unfolds, it is going to be affecting in a profound way almost everything that we do, irrespective of our careers and professions. Next. So that is something, quite serious. And whenever you have changes like this, you always try to seek guidance from theory. And I have looked at a number of theories in terms of how nations and communities and firms actually develop and become strong. And I found that Joseph Schumpeter really captured it quite well for me. There were some differences between his ideas and those of others, but I think the literature as it stands now seems to have settled on Schumpeter's ideas as being very fundamental in directing how firms and how countries can engage innovation and entrepreneurship. He coined, by the way, the word entrepreneurship to actually advance. And the theory of economic development that comes from Schumpeter is that it is a historical process of structural change, substantially driven by innovation. And innovation comes in, he elaborated it into 5 parts: launching a new product or a new species of already known product, application of new methods of production, sale of a product, opening of new markets, acquiring new sources of supply for raw materials, semi-finished and semi-finished goods, or new industry structures that are more efficient, and which can actually create more profit and so on. But he made the statement that caught my attention profoundly, is that Schumpeter argued that anyone seeking profits must innovate. And he went on to elaborate, on that. So that is the fundamental ideas that are guiding the whole process of innovation. And in fact, he went on to say, to elaborate that research and development is a must in the process of innovation and in the process of seeking profits, because it is through research and development that you create new knowledge that you can now transform into new products, into new services, etc. And that is going to be so disruptive on the market that it will indeed kill those processes and products that are not efficient, etc., etc. So the older, inefficient ones which can't compete will die out, and the new ones will continue. And that process continues in perpetuity. So that is where we are. So anybody who is not actually innovating really cannot be seeking profits and further development. Next. I saw another book which I'm going to recommend to you, New Imperatives of Innovation, which really transcribes or rather translates much of what I said into the Latin America and the Caribbean environment, and that is a very good book by the Inter-American Development Bank. And next, and in that they do summarize it quite well. In that the innovation is not a linear really process. I think most economists now agree that it's not a linear process where you do basic research and then apply the research and then you do some product development and then you do innovation and you go to commercialization, production, etc. It's not that linear. It turns out that actually when you look at the whole process of innovation, it does have a complex web of interactions. Look at the interactions almost at every level, all the way from potential markets to affecting the inventors who produce and analyze or design detailed designs and tests, redesign and produce. And then distribute and then market, and all this is tied up in a continuous interaction, process, not quite linear at all. You have to get feedback from almost everyone on a continuing basis. But that is innovation, for you. Next. And it has also been indicated, there is a study in Colombia, which have actually highlighted the fact that research and development can actually benefit countries like ours, which are way at the bottom of the economic ladder. Because we are starting from very far from the economic frontier, we can actually utilize information that is already available, or develop new information to enrich our economies. And there is a view that has been shown by analyzing companies in Colombia, and have shown that it actually does hold true. You can develop up to a point, and then you need to do other things in order to continue the development process as you advance. So the IDB does have some studies that show that it is wise for countries like ours, which are a bit backward in terms of research and development and integrating research and development into the economy. There is hope that we can actually get a big bang for our efforts, quite quickly. Next. And in fact, if the government comes in and assists with the research and development, the long-term benefits are better than if they did not. And again, a study of the impact of R&D in Colombia has quite revealed that it is much better to support those industries that can absorb R&D and integrate it into production and the whole economy than not supporting them at all. It was much better to support them. So there is evidence growing that our countries and our governments can actually do our societies better if they actually innovate. Next. And that is why many countries around the world who have been at it for quite a little while, they spend quite a bit of their money on research and development. And I want to highlight countries like Japan. 3% of their GDP is spent on research and development. South Korea, 4.5% of their GDP is spent on research and development. By comparison, India is about 0.65, and China, I need to look for China somewhere. China is about 2% now. Europe is in the neighborhood of about 1.78%. United States about 2.8%. We in Latin America and Caribbean 0.66. So Caribbean is about 0.09%. Let's say 0.1%. I think it's much less than that. But 0.1% is small enough to make the point. But Latin America, we are about 0.66%. But anyway, you would find that countries that are actually moving forward next, and the economies are, with the better economies, actually spending quite a bit of money on research and development, consistent with the Schumpeterian economic theories. Next. And yeah, the percentages do say something, and I will leave this figure for you to look at later on, and it's much of it is in the report. But this is money. In terms of, you can see the line at the top is the United States. Have been spending quite a bit of money, up to $460 billion now on research and development. But the Chinese are catching up. They are spending about $440 billion on research and development. And then you're followed by the European Union and so on and so forth. So the big person in countries that you associate with dominance on the technological side, on the manufacturing side, and so on, do engage in innovation and do quite a bit of investments in research and development. Next. So I think I've made that point clear. This is just patents. Those people spend money on research and development. They generate also large amounts of patents. Israel, Korea, Japan, and so on, perfect examples of that. Next. And of course, patents mean you can turn those patents into money. The number of researchers, we are not doing too badly in Latin America and the Caribbean. 520 is within the ballpark of other developing countries, but certainly the countries which are doing much better are, have deployed a huge number of individuals. Japan, 5,000 per million. United States, 4,000 per million. Canada, 4,000 per million. France, 4,000 per million. South Africa, 500. And Argentina, 1,192, which is commendable. Brazil, about 900. Latin America in general, about close to 600. So these countries which are spending more on research, they're also deploying quite a number of human resources in research and development. Next. This is a share of publications coming from countries, looking at countries which are collaborating. Yes, there is quite a significant amount of collaboration, about 20% globally. High-income countries, interestingly, seeking collaborations among themselves and also with the developing countries. Now, developing countries like ourselves in the Caribbean, we do collaborate a whole lot, about to the tune of 72% of our research activity is through collaborations, and mostly collaborating with high-income economies. Next. And again, this is a bigger picture of what I showed you earlier. I think I shouldn't. I can let you look at it. The point is, most of the developing countries are collaborating, but mostly developing countries are actually collaborating much more. Sub-Sahara, for example, 61% of their output is through collaboration. South Africa is about 58%. Caribbean is 71%, and so on. So we are using basically those collaborations to actually beat the lack of resources, that we have. Next. Here is the global volume of publications on cross-cutting strategies. We have most of the world now is focusing on artificial intelligence and robotics, and some on energy, and certainly on materials. But the rest of it, I was surprised to see that there is quite a big gap between those three that I just mentioned and everything else. So there is a huge attention on artificial intelligence and robotics, precisely for the same reasons that I talked to you about in terms of the fourth industrial revolution. You need artificial intelligence, you need robotics, and you're going to need suitable materials to actually drive the fourth industrial revolution. And so the activity is quite huge in those areas. Next. This is another way of putting the same information. Let's move on. I've focused a little bit on artificial intelligence and robotics to see who is actually involved in doing that. And China, India, United States, again, these are countries spending quite a bit of money, and they know what is coming in the industrial revolution, fourth industrial revolution, and quite a bit of their money is going into artificial intelligence and robotics. Next. In terms of on the energy side, again, is China, USA, and then a few others coming along. But those are the main players in terms of looking at different types of energy. And the next slide shows the areas of energy where research funding is going. Much of it is going into batteries, greater battery efficiency, and some transportation issues, biofuels, and so on. Some in the top, up there. Next. The Millennium Development Goals, I think we are as a global community, we are paying attention to those. and the Caribbean, we are here. We are putting in our share, but it's arguably it is, quite, it is quite small and in a way going down, but we are there. Next. Material science, again, is the same picture, the same players. China, Russia now pops up a little. United States is there, and India, Germany, and yeah. So, and then everybody else makes a small contribution, but those are the bigger players looking at materials. And this is very important because when the science is actually concentrated in the hands of a few, that has implications for the rest of us. But let me see if we can cover that one later on. Yes, next. Viruses are a bit of a problem now, and I think some attention began to be paid onto it around 2013, and that process has continued. But next, you're going to find Brazil spending quite a bit of money. It's a big country, and they are putting their money into ensuring that whatever virus comes around, they will be safe. But as you can see, many developing countries are troubled by these microbes, and they are paying attention, to them. Next. This is the share of women in countries that have artificial intelligence skills, and as you can see, the participation at 20% or so is. I think we need to do more, but there we are at 20% at the moment. Next. Yeah, and women seem to be going up, not enough, but in terms of the technical roles, at Facebook we have 23%, in managerial 33%, at Apple 23, 29, and you can see the numbers do go in. I think most likely, most certainly I should say, Samsung and Huawei, could do better, but again, that's where we are. So our ladies are coming up, but we still have quite a long way to go in terms of giving them the space to actually do the best they can. Next. Okay, so after that very quick scan through the fourth industrial revolution, the role of R&D and the theoretical foundation for it, etc., and looking at the global output in research and expenditure, or rather investment trends, we want to ask finally our question: is it are really CARICOM countries innovating into the fourth industrial revolution? My answer to it is yes, I think we are, but we are doing so very slowly and very haphazardly. Next slide, a few slides will show you exactly what I mean. For example, we have a good thing which is going for us. Long-term visions are in place in almost every country in the CARICOM. Has a long-term vision, and all the long-term visions that I have seen do put science, technology, and innovation on the critical point, or rather on a critical list of things that must be done in order for those long-term visions to succeed. So this is a huge realization that science, technology, and innovation will be essential if we are going to succeed in those long-term visions. It's quite clear. Almost each one of them has said that. But the problem, the negative part is there is no implementation plan. And there are no science, technology, and innovation policies to support the long-term vision. It's only Jamaica now has published its, rather approved its most recent science, technology, and innovation policy. But even that one, there is more vision-like things in that policy rather than things to do. There are some good things that are being proposed, but a mechanism now needs to be worked out as to how it is going to work. So yes, we celebrate the authorization or rather the passage of the policy, but we are still concerned that there are no implementation plans that have been actually put in place. So again, we have a problem. Trinidad and Tobago did have one, and they have been doing a couple of things that are consistent with it. But again, even there, not enough at all. Next. When you look at the Jamaican Vision 2030, which I suppose a good number of you have looked at, you're going to see that science and technology comes up at goal number 3. And it requires that everything we do in Jamaica must be driven by science and technology. Now, as I said, that's a very, very, very beautiful, but we need a plan on how we are going to achieve that. The policy was supposed to be the first output. We got the policy now, so we need to move forward. Next. These are some of the a collection of some of the long-term visions. Belize has Horizon 2030. Bahamas has a National Development Plan Vision 2040. Barbados medium term up 2013 to 2020. St. Vincent, they have a National Economic and Social Development Plan for about 2013 to 2025. Grenada medium-term debt management strategy. Debt is a problem for them, so they're focusing on it quite well. Antigua, they have a country program for green climate. For the green climate, they have put up a project there, and so on. Every country has one. Some more elaborate than others, but definitely every country took some time to think about the long-term development of their country. Next. And again, these are Jamaica to Vision 2020. Dominica, they want to be the National Resilience Development Strategy 2030. They want to be the first climate resilient country in the world, and they're banking on science to actually take them there. Trinidad has that Vision 2030, again, as I mentioned earlier, and Guyana, with it, wants to spend its oil money basically developing their Vision 2040, which is to be increase their status as a green economy. So we do have long-term visions next, nearly in every country. The question is, we now need to develop plans and where the investment is going to come from, how much we need, who is going to do what, how do we get in the human resources to actually get that one done, how do we get technology, science and technology to diffuse across ministries, within ministries. All of that has to be worked out, and we still have quite a lot of work to do. But broadly speaking, what we are doing is consistent with what's happening elsewhere. I was looking at the African Union. They have the Agenda 2063, pretty much similar to the long-term agendas that I just spoke about a little while ago. Next. Let me skip that. Again, that was elaborating. Next. Yeah, we are, no, before that, go back, please. Yeah, we are not, as I said earlier, we're not doing too badly in terms of the number of staff working in research and development. But particularly for the government, we are doing badly for research and development in industry, but we are doing okay for academia and the government. But the negative is that whereas we have people in universities and government laboratories and so on, they have no money to work with. They have no resources to work with. And so they're not actually realizing their full potential, except next universities, which have now countered that with collaborations with countries where they can access resources. That is one way of fighting, that. But otherwise, many of the institutions that are doing research really don't have the capacity, don't have the resources to actually work with. So that's what I mean by we have some ideas in terms of what needs to be done, but we don't have the plans, and we haven't quite thought through many of the questions that need to be answered in order for us to benefit from that vision. Next, please. Yeah, again, this is collaboration. Next. Okay, when we look at our publications, there is some very, very, very positive things. Every country is publishing in the CARICOM. Don't worry about how much they are publishing. They are publishing. The problem is that the negative side to it is that the volume is small, the trends are erratic, and as you can see, the lines are going up and down. And this is Trinidad and Tobago, which should not be, and Jamaica here. You shouldn't be getting this kind of erratic output. You need something steady. The saving grace is Grenada, has had a steady rise in their publications, followed these days by St. Kitts and Nevis, and also to a certain extent Bahamas too. But a good number of CARICOM countries actually are just on a roller coaster, so to speak. And we need to stabilize our output. And I think the reason why we have these roller coasters is because we have not actually thought through what it is going to take for us to benefit immensely from innovation, research and research and and development. Next. And I did speak about yes, and we are not quite diversified in our research effort and research output. Health, which is in the pink in the middle here, health dominates our output, and we need more. We need engineering, we need agriculture, we need physics, we need chemistry, we need environment, and so on. So we have deficits in those areas, even though we are making commendable effort in the area of health. Next. This is our contributions to artificial intelligence, energy, and other very important areas. Again, you can see the roller coaster everywhere. Consistency not really at a level at which we would like. And so part of actually stabilizing this and ensuring that we can actually begin to grow and benefit from research and development is really to figure out quite well what we are going to do about stabilizing our output and our effort, in these key areas that are vital to our economy. Next. We look at the high-tech industries. These are guns, military hardware, computers, pharmaceuticals, and so on. And as Barbados is there, it produces pharmaceuticals that it exports to other countries, which is a good thing. And other countries also have small amounts, but it's there, and we can build on it. So these are patents. I'm sorry, these are patents. And so these are patents, and every country is producing some. Barbados, of course, has patents from other countries, which find it to be a safer place for patents and so on. But again, the negative side to it is that the indigenous volume is too small, the trend is erratic or actually stagnant. So we need more of the indigenous persons to actually do the patents. Next. I see my time running quite quickly. I'm going to have to speed up a little here. Again, I was started earlier talking about manufacturing and exporting high tech. Barbados is there with its pharmaceuticals. St. Kitts and Nevis is there with its computers and computer chips, supplying military hardware overseas and so on, which is quite a good thing. I am not quite remembering exactly what Suriname exports, but they are there, as well. But again, the volumes are small, the trends are erratic, and in some cases a bit stagnant. Next. I will skip that summary. I'll let you do the reading. Let me hurry up and cover a couple of things. Some suggestions as to what we need, what could be done. I'm suggesting that in order to have a working STI enterprise, you have to have a basic science. You need to have the applied. You need to have the science and society where you can link up to gauge appetites for particular products, etc. And then you need science, innovation, and entrepreneurship to come together and create those industries. And I'm not suggesting that all of these things must be within the one individual, but it must be that the enterprise itself, in its diverse ways, it must have capacities or capabilities in these directions. I'm sorry, let me plug in my computer. I see it's kind of disappearing. Sorry about that. I think I don't want to close it here. Yeah, sorry about that. Next. Yes, I think CARICOM governments and scientists would have to collaborate more closely in that journey. Jamaica already started. They are not talking to everybody, they're talking to some scientists, but that's okay. The Eastern Caribbean states and Guyana, they are talking to the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center and the UWI Climate Change Group. They have done marvelously well. They have brought together several countries in the Caribbean, which is a new thing, and they're collaborating together to exploit geothermal resources, to manage their water, to manage resilience issues in Dominica, and green economy issues in Guyana. And the amount of funds that have come from the climate change effort, to support the climate change effort and managing the aftermath of it has been quite phenomenal. And that is a good thing to actually emulate. Next. We need to institutionalize the government science consultations. And I have been calling for stronger Caribbean Academy of Sciences, Science engineers. The business of, for example, people asking, well, if I join the Caribbean Academy of Sciences, what am I going to get? If my department joins Science, what is my department going to get? We have to build these institutions. We have to make them stronger. We must give them a voice where they can actually address they can address these issues with the government and with the private sector as well. And they have to be diverse. Everybody is needed here, not just those who are doing the research, but you need people who are putting together the evidence to show that something can actually work. And then you need to get those who are going to sell it. I'm reminded of the challenges we had with COVID-19, people refusing to be vaccinated. It's not because the vaccine doesn't work, but some people decided they're not going to have it, and they managed to convince other people not to do so. So you need to work on those. You need to work on multiple fronts to be able to get far. Next. Yes, and again, I'm putting this back to remind us that innovation and the integration of research into the productive process is quite a complex and not a linear process. So we need everybody, to be involved. Next. And I think we need to build the human resource capacity very, very, very carefully and deliberately. And we need to start quite early. Chumps is a good metaphor to work with. You start very early, and then you build them up. By the time they finish university and so on, they have the kind of orientation, professional orientation that you'd like them to have. Next. And small businesses from young people, particularly those in universities who are trying to turn their knowledge into businesses. This is one of the UWI ones. Next. And there is another one too, and there are several of them. So we need to find them, we need to support them, and we need to make them an example that others can follow. Next. Good. And we need, I think I can't emphasize this enough, we need coordination. We are not coordinating our efforts quite well. And I think that CARICOM has tried its ways. It works in different ways. It has an energy center, for example, in Barbados. It has there is a 5 Cs. There is UWI in all its higher education forms, CARDIC, CARFA, a whole host of institutions, but they're not coordinated. Their activities are not coordinated, and therefore we are not getting the kind of punch we could get from them if there was greater coordination, greater resourcing, greater collaboration, and so on. And in fact, if you go back to my to one of the slides I showed earlier, collaboration among Caribbean people, researchers, is not with other Caribbean people, is with other people overseas because they're driven by access to resources. So we're not going to be able to sustain our efforts and integrate them into our developmental agenda if we really don't deal with this coordination issue. The business of every scientist doing whatever they want, when they want, how they want, and if they want, that cannot actually take us anywhere. Next. Yeah, and again, as I said, there are many areas in which we can collaborate. Countries have spoken; they have not planned, but they have spoken. So we can engage them on what they have committed themselves to do, and help help them and ourselves, to actually do it better. Next. I wanted to comment briefly on the Jamaican science policy in terms of the sort of detailed that we are seeing. The policy says we are going to go from 0.06% of GDP to 1.5% by 2030. We have a few years to go, and I hope that we will be able to reach that 1.5% of GDP devoted to research and development. We want to make sure that our local consultants earn 30% of the consultancy dollar. They go from 30% currently to 60%. By 2030. We want to manage the STI better. We want to resource it better. We want to coordinate it better. We want to track it better. And we want to enhance more inclusive participation in it. It's quite it's aspirational still, not a plan to work. But it is if these commitments are honored, we will have moved a little bit forward. Next. And enhance private public sector investments in research and development. That one is so critical. And quickly next wanted to say to you that the government can't have to pay for everything. In many countries, government pays for university work. Next. And private sector pays for work that helps it to generate money. Our countries and our governments are not doing any of these two things. So we need to move from this. Next. Yeah, and as an example of why we need to move, we sponsored a study of the Jamaica Manufacturers Association, and I will just give you one or two highlights. Next. When they were asked about barriers to manufacturing process, and you can see they have competition. They have competition. They have higher production costs and a few other things. Research and development is, they really didn't know how to place that. Next, and when they were asked about if they have employed anyone for research and development, there are quite a number of them who had none, and a few of them had token numbers. Just a few large companies, about nearly half of the large companies say they had more than 10. But again, these are small numbers. They cannot sort out the problems, that we have. We need to engage more people who are in the manufacturing sector, engage them in research and development. Next. Yeah, and this was the most depressing one for me. Asked whether they have ever engaged or collaborated with the local universities. The manufacturers who responded, 84% of them said no. Only 16% of them actually have engaged with the academy. And when they have got a massive amount of problems that could actually benefit from research, and development. Next, I think that one is final. Next, yeah. So I wanted to thank my co-author on the UNESCO report, Alison Gajada, and also the UNESCO team, which produced many of the charts that you see in the in the reports. I'm sorry, I think I took a little bit more time than I thought, but I thought I would. But I trust that there will be a minute or so for some discussion, some questions. Thank you so much for your attention. So, Chairman,
thank you so much, Prof. Kahwa, for that talk. And as I promised, you delivered, and I'm sure that everyone also delivered a wonderful presentation, a lot of data, and I hope that folks have time to review this at the end. Now, we do have a question. I think that we could take at least one, although we're just a little over time. And this question comes from someone in the audience, and they are asking about how would we get our Caribbean governments and institutions to follow the example that Cuba has done in supporting its scientists with institutions and resources as best they can, so that they can have critical mass that would then reap benefits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. I think it is important to remember that Cuba has a very strong system of Academy of Sciences. And they have a voice, they have a coordinated voice. They could meet every year to decide on what the priorities should be, and they go and face the government, et cetera, et cetera. So what I was suggesting is that we need to strengthen our own relationships with the government. Let us not wait for the government to do it, to invite us to the table. Let us figure out how we can get to the table as a group. One person going there is, I can tell you, you're not going to make much impact. But we need to figure out how we can go as a Caribbean Academy of Sciences or Cari Science or some kind of group, it doesn't matter what you call it, but a group that can come together and say and mention something. We had made some progress with Dr. Keith Mitchell as a committee, but that has kind of died now. And so we have no voice at the moment. And I think,
yes, so we do need to have implementation plan, coordination, and an organization with a voice. Absolutely. In order to move this forward.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize enough the responsibility of our scientists. Sometimes we just leave it to government and leave it to private sector. It's not going to happen. We scientists, I mean, the fee that we pay to Cari Science and the Caribbean Academy of Sciences is small. Let us strengthen one of those organizations or both, and then let them be a voice that carries our ideas to the public, the private sector, and the government. We have a responsibility, we scientists.
We do have a responsibility, and I think that we do have some folks on the ground around the region who could champion that with a little support from people like you who know better and who's been in this and studied this for several years. And we've seen in your presentation that you have given us some suggestions, which of course I think are timely, and we should pay attention to those suggestions. I wanted this time to invite Dr. Ziar Min. Are you able to use your microphone? We want to do a vote of thanks for our very special and very celebrated Prof. Kahwa, who is also a friend and a mentor to many of us.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Prof. Kahwa, how are you? So I'd just like to, on behalf of the entire conference organizing committee and all the scientists and attendees of the conference, it is my great honor and pleasure to give the vote of thanks for coming to speak to us at this conference as one of our plenary speakers. You know, it was an excellent presentation, but what always stands out is with you and your work and your data is that your vision and leadership to bring light to this very important type of data and research. I mean, I personally firsthand as know all about you being a leading scientist in the field of inorganic chemistry and photoelectronic lanthanide chemistry, but also now with time focusing on such very pertinent and important data and research. And it's also especially suitable for this conference, especially because, you know, this forecast conference is the beginning, I believe, of a new era of collaboration in the region of scientists, not just scientists, but scientists, industry, and hopefully government as well. You know, hopefully it continues from this conference. We're hoping that new networks and collaborations will arise, and that has been highlighted especially in this talk. But, you know, as you and Dr. Ford just mentioned, the responsibility as we have as scientists, that is what I take away as one of the legacy, your legacy that you leave. And for those members in the audience, I'm somewhat of a supervisorial grandson of Professor Kahwa, so I'm very much exposed to Prof. Kahwa's excellence in research and the legacy that he has left. And with this talk and with these conversations, hopefully we can continue these conversations and implement some tangible outcomes to make a significant and impactful change in the future. And, you know, one thing I would like to say is that I've always said this about, I think of Prof. Kahwa along with some of the other leaders in science in our region. We are where we are today because we stand on the shoulders of giants. And Prof. Kahwa, you have definitely been a giant for many of us. And I would like to sincerely thank you again for this excellent talk and presentation.
Thank you very much for those kind words.
Thank you so much, Dr. Min. And of course, those are also my sentiments. I wish to thank Prof. Kahwa and all of you folks who are in the audience who've listened. And please do continue because we have this session on vision next. And we do also have some workshops and other sessions this afternoon and tomorrow. So we encourage you to continue with the conference and learn some more, collaborate some more, grow your mind, and then go back and do great and excellent science and development for our region. Have a great afternoon, folks. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm.